everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits, the only podcast with old friends discussing old comics and the people that created them. I'm Joe Marcello, joined as always by my partners in crime, Orrin Phillips.
Hey, how are you?
And Mike Farah.
What's up?
So in a couple of minutes, you're going to hear one of our fantastic interviews. We had a chance to speak with Erik Larsen. He is one of the pioneers and creators of Image Comics. There's no longer the big two. For a long time, it was just DC and Marvel kind of running the whole show. But in the 90s, a bunch of creators got together, they created Image. And since then, they have been hitting it out of the park with some really, really great content.
This falls into the, oh my gosh, he's actually responding, and oh my gosh, he actually said yes department. I had to call Joe. I think he was driving. I said that this is very important. We got Erik Larsen. I think he didn't believe me at first, but it is Erik Larsen. He did show up, and it's just, what a cool dude. I mean, for someone who's just had this meteoric rise in comics, really laid back, really cool guy, very open about stuff. You're going to love this interview. We love this interview.
Yeah. Larsen's one of my favorites. When McFarlane left Amazing Spider-Man, you thought, who's going to step into those shoes? And Erik Larsen did. And not only did he fill those shoes, he took it in, his own sort of bent, individual style, and really just kind of made Amazing Spider-Man his own with, the way the poses that he used were just amazing. And then to take all of that over to Savage Dragon and to Image and really build up a character out of nothing and get all of that, sort of comic energy and that really like cartoonish, drawing style sort of amped up to 11 was really a sight to behold. And it, Savage Dragon's still there. It's one of the longest running comics in Image, and probably one of the longest running, I guess you could say, independent or at least not big two comics out there. So, kudos to him. Looking forward to hearing more of this interview. I'm sure you guys did a stellar job. So let's hear it.
So honored and privileged to have Erik Larsen joining us today. Thank you, sir.
All right. Woohoo.
We will put in the fanfare when I edit this. Orrin, by all means, you please kick it off for us.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk to you quickly about starting out with Megaton.
All right.
Yeah, I don't have that issue. I have other issues.
Going back to the Taft administration.
How did you meet up? How did you get that gig? And what was that experience like in just starting out?
I had self-published a comic book called Graphic Fantasy with a couple of friends that I met through a comic book store in Bellingham, Washington. And after we had self-published this book, my dad had a printing press, so we actually printed it in my living room. But after we had self-published that, we sent copies out to anyone we could think of who might review it and give us some free publicity. Did that. And then Gary Carlson contacted me because he bought it through the mail. And he was a big collector of fanzines and was putting together this book called Megaton, which was basically, he was looking for guys who were just about ready to break in so he could snap them up and have them do something for him. And so he gave a bunch of people who were just kind of starting out some of their early first work. And it was cool because it was like he was hiring some people who were professionals also, and or just lower level professionals or something. And so it's like, let's do this. Let's make this thing happen. And it was kind of neat just to be able to work with him and stuff like that.
Now that's where Savage Dragon started to come together a bit. Did you pitch that to him, the character? Or
We did it our book that we created together, our story was Vanguard. And
Right.
so I was plotting that. I kind of took over plotting it pretty quick. Like it was real early on that I was like, I know how to do this. And by the third issue, I was scripting it and inking it. The first one, the first two, I think I kind of co-plotted and penciled, and had some other people ink them.
Mm.
And then with the third one, I was doing the whole thing myself. And at that point, I was like, oh, let's bring the dragon in there. Cool.
Was it the first time that you had someone else ink your work, or
yeah, it was. It was. Sam De La Rosa, I think, inked my stuff in the first issue of Megaton, and Sam Granger inked my stuff on the second. So,
what's
yeah,
that like as an artist, having that happen for the first time?
It's always weird just to see what kind of choices people make with your stuff. It's like you're putting lines down, and you intended those lines to be there for the most part, and except it's like when you're inking your own stuff, you'll make subtle changes to your own stuff anyway. So that's what an inker does, is he's supposed to figure out which are the right lines and which are the wrong ones, and make sense of it all.
And then from there, you did some work right here and some other stuff with the DC.
It was a little longer process than that.
Okay.
I ended up kind of trying to find work wherever I could. Two different guys had bought the graphic fantasy fanzine and given me work through those. One of them was Gary, and the other one was a guy who did a book called Wonder World Express. And I contributed to 3 issues of that. I don't even know how many came out. I know that at least one did. And so I did stories for him. And then I got work for a company called AC Comics out of, I think they're in Florida. And I did Sentinels of Justice and Night Vale and something else. And then somewhere around there, I ran into Jim Shooter at a convention in Chicago. And at that point, I had done enough stuff that I was kind of pro, but not very good yet. But I at least had some actual work under my belt. And so when I met him, he said, "Oh, you're a pro now," and because I've been showing him my stuff all the time. And I'm like, "Yes, I am." He said, "How would you like to do a story for Marvel Fanfare?" Which was code for how would you like to do an inventory job. So at that point, Marvel and DC books were monthly and had to be monthly, because if those books shipped late, they would get a fine from the printer. So they had to be coming out on the dot. If you're a first week book, your book comes out that first week, every week, for every month, forever. So that was just the way things were. So in order to cover their ass when books were running late, they would get these inventory jobs that would be sitting in a drawer, just waiting to drop into place in case one of their editors, writers, or pencilers just completely fumbled the ball, and they just needed to put something in place. Right. At one point, they used to put reprints in there. They were just like, "You like this issue of Fantastic Four before? Here it is again." But now at that point, it was, we're going to have these inventory jobs, which were frequently things like album issues, where the Fantastic Four would just be like, "Hey, let's reminisce about our old stories that we used to have," or stuff like that. Right. And then they would start doing these inventory jobs, and sometimes it would be like, "We're going to get good people to do these inventory jobs, and when they show up, they'll be awesome." So you'd get Barry Windsor Smith doing an issue of the X-Men or something like that. That'd be some job that they've been stockpiling it, and as soon as it was there, they could go, "Okay, let's slot this into continuity," and bam, there we go. Awesome. But so with me, me and Jim, I said, "Yeah, let's plot it here." And he's like, all right. And so we went out into the hotel bar and plotted out a Hulk versus Thor story. And that just became great samples for me to show to anybody else. It'd be like, here's what I can do. And it's like, holy crap, it's Hulk versus Thor, and it's 22 pages, and it's everything I knew how to do. So it's just two guys kicking the crap out of each other. And it's like, that's what I do best. So that led to me getting all kinds of stuff. So it led to me getting a fill in on the Amazing Spider-Man. It led to me getting the DN agents over at Eclipse Comics. And then there was an editor over at DC who was championing my stuff. Mike Gold was like, he was wanting to get me some kind of gig. So DN agents ended up being 5 issues. That's how long that lasted. And then in the midst of it, I did an issue of Spider-Man. And then over at DC, Mike Gold he really wanted to get me onto Teen Titans, but Marv wasn't having it. So I did whatever the hell I could over there. So I did 2 issues of Teen Titans Spotlight, and then I did a Secret Origin of Nightwing, and I actually did do 1 issue of the Teen Titans. And then what the hell else did I do? They had me do some issues of The Outsiders. I did an issue of Adventures of Superman with Marv. I think that's when he was like, yeah, this guy sucks. But it was, it's all, I gotta figure this thing out. And there's a lot of things that are sort of on the job training as you go and you do this stuff. It's like, oh, that's how you do this, and that's how you do that. And you just you figure this stuff out over time, and hopefully get better at it.
Did they try to change your style at all?
No, I did. I kept trying to find different ways of doing things. I would just get into a funk where I'd be like, oh, I really love what Keith Giffen's doing on this book. I got to do like Keith Giffen. And so when I first started doing the Doom Patrol, it was a my poor man's Keith Giffen, or different. Sometimes it would get super cartoony, and sometimes it would get super not cartoony. I was really, really affected by whatever the hell I was looking at that particular week.
Now, was this Doom Patrol here your first cover for DC?
Issue 6 would have been the first, so okay. that would have been it. I think that would have been.
Yeah, this one's 9.
Doom Patrol 6.
Okay.
God, I'm not sure. Because they would have me do like little stuff. It would be like, hey, you want to do characters for Who's Who? And I would just take everything. And it's like, I'll find a way. It doesn't matter. If I have to stay up all night, bat this issue out in a week, I'll do it. I'll find a way. Because that was the gig. It was, you make yourself useful, because they need guys that are useful. And if you can be like a guy who's making his deadlines, it's like, oh, hell yeah, I'll be that guy.
What was it like going from the independents, though, to a big company like DC? Was it?
It was no different.
No different? Okay.
No different. I mean, I wasn't living in New York, so It's all just mailing in stuff. I mean, the scripts were a little better when you're working at Marvel at DC. There was some pretty funky stuff when I was doing stuff for some of the indie guys. Mm-hmm. But the only thing is, when I was doing independent stuff, I had so much freedom that when I got to DC and Marvel and stuff, I kind of had in my head as, oh, this is the way it's done. You just do whatever the hell you want to, and they have to deal with it. And it's sort of an eye opener to go, no, that's not really how everybody works on all this stuff. On the Doom Patrol, I took way, way, way more liberties than I should have been allowed to take. And they were just like, okay, man, go for it. And they were totally fine with it. But then you get on other books and there's like, no, the writer wanted this thing, you drew something else. And I was like, oh, I thought mine was cooler, but whatever you say.
Yeah, that was actually going to be one of my questions for is like, do you know, of course we're talking to you as fans, and you know we really know nothing of the process, but you know, are you just given free reign to, you know, kind of do whatever at this point in when I say this point, meaning that what you were referring to, that period of time, were you just given free reign to kind of do your thing, or
Well, understand this, at that point in time, writers almost exclusively wrote plots. They weren't writing full scripts. So the one time that I did work from a full script at DC was on a couple issues of The Outsiders, and on those, it seemed like the writer just broke it up as, okay, it's just going to be 5-panel pages from here on out. Okay. And on that, I was like, well, this sucks. I'm gonna take a bunch of this stuff that isn't as visually interesting and cram it all onto other pages so I can open things up and have there be a big shot of the villains or a big shot of this and that. So I was really so I did move stuff around quite a bit, but I'm like, you're gonna be able to fit every word you've got on here in the order that you've got, but I'm going to give you some moments that are going to be big moments instead of the way you've got it written. Right. So, but on the other stuff, when I'm working from a plot, it really depends wildly on the writers. Some would be super vague. In some cases on Amazing Spider-Man, David Michelinie would just go, pages 14 through 18, fight. And you'd just be like, all right, I guess I'll have them fight.
A lot of guidance.
I could do that. And sometimes he would say, like, maybe they do this, maybe they do that. And it's like, all right. It could, but there's a lot of, I thought, flexibility in that. You could just go, okay, well, I can do this sort of thing with it or that sort of thing with it and play around with it a bit and try to make it into something cool.
Right. Now, did you jump to Marvel or did they recruit you to come over?
I think I had sent stuff over to everybody at one point. So it was like all editors, I would just barrage them with, this is what I'm doing. This is what I want to do. I wanted to work at Marvel. I was a big Marvel fan as a kid. So that was my goal. And also fairly early on, I had met Todd McFarlane and some of the other guys who would later on join me in this Image Comics venture.
That Todd McFarlane guy.
And Todd was like, you know, he would get these royalty checks from DC that would be like nothing. Right. And so he's like, oh no, you're gonna go to Marvel, bud. That's where the money is. You know, that's the guys. You're never gonna make a good living doing this DC stuff. That's no good. So it's like, all right, well, you say so, buddy. But really, those were the characters I liked. So it was like, I want to do the Fantastic Four. I want to do the Hulk. I want to do Thor. I want to do Captain America. I'll do Spider-Man. I don't care. I'll do anything. I just want to be over there. So while I was doing the Doom Patrol, I got a call to do an issue of Incredible Hulk. Todd was leaving that book, and they just needed a warm body to do a fill-in on his way out. And they had Todd do thumbnails for it, and I worked off of his thumbnails. I blew them up and changed things around a little bit. But
did they want you to copy his style at all, or they say you're okay using your own
I think
style?
they would have preferred that I did, but I kind of strayed. Whatever. I mean, they were in the same basic poses, but I wasn't. sitting there going, I'm going to become Todd McFarlane on this book.
Right. I say, is that frustrating though, as an artist, to be told, you know, you have your own style, but you're asked sometimes, can you sort of emulate someone else?
Haven't really, nobody's really been pressured me to do that. So it's always, I mean, when I was following Todd on Spider-Man, he had an approach and was like, well, I know that the fans would probably prefer if I kind of kept at least some of these same things going. So I'm going to do that. But, you know, most of those were really sort of window dressing things anyway, you know, like, oh, put a double fat border on here, or put a squiggly line border or something like that, that just makes it look exciting, but isn't necessarily affect the drawing at all. There's, you know, it's like, I don't construct a figure the way Todd constructs a figure or draw faces the way he does. We both kind of lean a little cartoony. So I think I was a decent fit in terms of following him. Also, when I was on the Doom Patrol earlier, I had followed Steve Lytle, and Steve's stuff was diametrically opposed to my stuff. We were like two opposite ends of the spectrum. And the fan reaction was, this guy is terrible when I came on. So when I was following Todd, I was like, well, let me ease the transition a bit. Yeah. But it was also easier because our styles were more similar to begin with.
Right.
I was going to say, like, you guys have both, I mean, you have different styles, but you have styles that are, I would say, complementary to one another. I mean, it's, dude, it just knocks it out of the park for, you know, I'm gushing, by the way, for characters like Spider-Man, who really just, sorry, you know, there's no one really up until you guys that really, I would say, you know, really delve into the style of that character. I mean, you know, there were other artists that have really great renditions, but you guys really had this, you know, dare I say, organic way of creating the characters. And, you know, it was 90s. It was, and I don't mean that in any negative way. I mean, you guys set the tone for what would be like, you know, when someone says, okay, 90s characters, what do you think? And, you know, they're going to throw up, you know, in their heads, you know, your renditions of Spider-Man and, you know, probably, dare I say, Liefield's Heroes Reborn, you know, a Captain America and, you know, Deadpool and things like that. So it's pretty amazing. So
it was a fun time to be working in comics, as are they all, really.
Well, I wanted to ask how it was for you personally, because not only are you getting one of the most iconic books ever, but you're following, you know, McFarlane, who kind of boosted the character again. Did you feel pressure on yourself, or were you sort of like, okay, I'm not following it, I'm just going to do my thing? And
yeah, well, you kind of knew going into it that there was that. I was like, all right, if sales go down, everybody expects that, because Todd has set this high bar. They expect that sales are going to go down. If sales maintain, you're a miracle worker, and if sales go up, then it's like, oh, you're the second coming, whatever. So it worked out real well because Todd was gone. You know, it wasn't like he left Spider-Man and he went and did some other book and the masses would just follow him on to something else. He was gone. So people who liked Spider-Man were like, we're going to continue to buy Spider-Man, and sales actually went up following Todd on that book. So it's like,
really?
Woohoo! This worked out real well. I mean, his last issue did phenomenally well. So that one was like that one bumped up, the one with the Hulk. But on the regular book was like sales were just bam, 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 bam. They kept going up. So
what would you attribute that
worked
to?
out all right.
What would you attribute that to? The story, the art, everything?
And it had a lot of things going for it. We were cycling through all the villains that everybody loves, and whatever. I think the timing was good, and Todd was no longer there anymore, and we were doing something somewhat new, I guess.
Mhm.
So it was like you just kind of were able to keep the momentum that had been going. So luckily, that worked out all right.
I'd be remiss not to ask about Venom. There was the initial, idea, the drawing of Venom, and you. Here I'm going to go. Shoot, you made it incredible. You made him scary. Like he's ferocious. Like I remember seeing this cover here. I bought it in CVS when I was a kid, and I'd never seen anything like it. And I was like, "This is insane!" Like, what did you see Venom as when you first started, and what did you want to add to him as a character?
Well, let me see. I think Todd, from his first appearance to his second, had made him a little bit more monstrous.
Mhm.
So I was like, all right, so we'll just keep that going. We'll just make it more and more monstrous as time got on. Actually, Todd had done a trade paperback cover of Spider-Man versus Venom. And when they're fighting on that cover, Venom had his mouth open and you could see his tongue. So it's like, oh, Todd's giving him a tongue now. I got to give him a tongue. But I didn't buy the book because I already had the comics. So I didn't need to get a trade paperback. But in my mind, he was giving him this big weird tongue now. So I had always attributed the big weird tongue to Todd. It wasn't until years later that I saw the book again. It was like, no, his mouth was just open. He could just see that he owned a tongue, but he didn't do anything crazy with it at all. That was entirely you because you're not paying attention. So yeah, I guess I'm responsible for giving him this big, weird, crazy tongue just because my memory is so poor. So
did you like the character Venom?
I liked him as a visual. I thought conceptually he was really stupid.
Really?
Yeah, because he was just like Spider-Man's lovesick laundry mixed up with this reporter who was, I mean, his origin is such a pile of shit. You just go, I'm a reporter and I'm reporting about this sin eater guy, and then it turned out that he was a guy who was confessing to crimes and didn't really do the crimes. And when Spider-Man caught the real guy, then it was out. It's like, it's just such a mess. It was such an indirect, weird reason for wanting revenge. And it wasn't a strong reason for wanting revenge. In my mind, a strong reason for wanting revenge would be Spider-Man is a building catches on fire, it's collapsing. Spider-Man saves all but one person in the building, and his wife or sister or something like that dies in this thing. It's like, oh, I'm pissed off at Spider-Man because this person I love is dead. That's like, now there's a reason to be pissed off. But this whole weird reporter thing was like, so would you be going after the policeman if they caught the sin eater? Would you be going after Captain America if he caught the sin eater? What the hell, man? It seems really kind of this vague, weird thing. And plus it's like, you just lost your job? You couldn't just get another job? People lose jobs all the time. They're not trying to kill somebody because they lost their job.
Guess we should become supervillains now then.
You know, it just seemed, as revenge things go, it seemed really weak tea, you know? It's really namby-pamby, like that's not a reason to go wanting to kill somebody.
Right. Well, what about that?
And it's like, why not at that point try and kill your boss? He's the guy who fired you. I mean, Spider-Man didn't fire you. He just caught a bad guy. What is he supposed to just let that guy kill other people? That's not cool. You know? So that's the part of Venom that I was like, this part sucks. And, you know, and then the costumes rationale for, I hate Spider-Man because he rejected me. It's like, that's kind of silly too. and you combine those into one uber villain, and it's like, all right, this guy's just dumb. But in terms of visuals, he's a cool visual. He's super fun to draw.
So
More
I
fun
want
to draw in ink than in pencil, unfortunately, because in pencil you're sitting there, he's got all this black, and so you're like, you know, in ink you're just like bam, bam, tossing down things with a brush, and you can be really expressive with it. But at that point, I wasn't inking my own work, so it was a little tedious to draw.
Since you're discussing Venom, what do you think about, or you know, do you have any opinion on kind of what they've done with the mythos of Venom over the years? I mean, like most recently, they have a whole. Fair enough.
I don't follow all this stuff.
Okay.
I think with a lot of stuff with me, once I'm off a book, it's sort of like keeping track of an ex-girlfriend. You're kind of like, no, that's behind me. I'm not even checking this stuff out at all. I don't care anymore. I don't want to see how she's dating and what she's doing with some other dude. We're gone. That's
all right.
That's gone.
So no Facebook
with a lot
stalking.
of books, like when I stopped working on Spider-Man, on Amazing Spider-Man, I stopped reading Spider-Man. That was it. And a lot of these other books too. It's like, I'm off the book, I'm done.
Okay.
And so that it was just a clean break. And then it'd be sometimes years later, I'd be like, oh, let me check this out, see how she's doing.
Well, if you could come together, put something together as, what do you think would be the ultimate villain for Spider-Man? Like, what would this person, you know, have going against Spider-Man that would make them such a strong villain?
Well, like I say, if in terms of, it depends what you want from a villain, because there's a lot of different things there. There's a lot of components as to what that is. You can have a villain who just, I hate Spider-Man and I just want to get revenge on Spider-Man. But the problem with those kind of villains is, you know, all Spider-Man has to do is take off his clothes and walk around as Peter Parker, and that villain has nothing to do anymore. He's nobody's pissed off at. He's got nothing going on. Just like, hey, everything's hunky dory. Peter Parker's walking around. So that kind of villain has got a very kind of limited whatever. But a real villain would be like, this guy wants to do something that Spider-Man doesn't want done. You know, like if this villain is out to destroy the Daily Bugle all the time, or out to destroy this all the time, or out to do whatever, then it's like, well, I work at the Daily Bugle. I don't want that being destroyed. Or he hates my Aunt May. I love my Aunt May. I gotta protect her at every turn. You know, so there gets to be different parts of it. But ideally, you don't want a villain whose only motivation is revenge against that hero, because it's just boring. And he's not protecting anybody or saving anybody at that point, which is what a superhero ideally should be doing, is not just saving their own ass, but protecting others and saving the world, as it were.
Now, during this time, you know, it's a really young crew of guys, including yourself, a lot of the Image guys who were leading the charge at Marvel. It's, you know, this fresh blood coming in. And you guys you're honestly changing the game, because your style of art was a lot different than stuff that was coming out, you know, in these books in the 80s. What was that atmosphere like with the influx of young talent?
Well, I mean, we're all kind of competing against each other, trying to one up each other in terms of kind of every aspect about it, you know? So it's like, oh, you're making your panels look crazy. I'm going to make mine look crazier. Oh, you know, you get these guys, and suddenly these things that one guy would do would be rippling through everybody else's work. You know, you see like, oh, Simon Bisley's putting big veins on people's arms. Suddenly everybody in comics is walking around with big veins in their arms, you know? And you kind of, some of it's like, all right, I'm not going to be the second guy to follow this, but if everybody's doing it, then okay. But you got is when Sam Keith started putting like those wiggly phone cord type things on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, all right, is this going to catch on? Is everybody going to be doing this, or is it just going to be that one dude? And so it was pretty much just him. Jim bit once. Jim Lee had it in some of his X-Men stuff, and I'm like, oh look, you bit, you did it. But most of us were just like, all right, everybody wants to do Michael Golden lighting with double lit this, and we're all putting lines here. Oh, you can put lines there. Oh, I'll do that too. I'm going to do it even cooler. I'll get my guy even bigger, gnarlier hands than yours. So we were just trying to outdo it. And there was a company called Comics Images, which was taking shots from the comics and slapping them on t-shirts. So it would be like, I want to do those shots to get slapped onto t-shirts. I want to see how many shirts I can get out of this issue. and we would get nothing. They wouldn't even send us shirts or anything. And we would get zero money. But the idea that I'm going to do this cool shirt shot that's going to be on everything, this would be great. So it was just fun. And we knew each other through conventions. We'd met each other here and there. So it's like, I met Todd fairly early on. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, all right, I don't think he was married to Wanda yet. And so it's like, all right, I know this guy, and hung out at his place and went to a convention. And I was up at his house when he was working on an issue of Spider-Man at one point, and was helping him pencil in some of the figures for a character that I ended up designing, because I did a fill-in on his book, the assassination, whatever that thing was.
Yeah.
I did my issue, and then he was still working on the issue before my fill-in issue. And I was visiting him when he was working on that one. And I had designed the character Solo in the issue I did. Okay. So he hadn't drawn him in the previous issue yet. So I was in there going and drawing in his costume all over the place so that he could just ink it. And so it's like, all right, this will be fun. Penciling a little bit of this in here, because he was inking all his own stuff. So that was kind of fun to do.
Yeah, I didn't realize you created Solo.
Yeah, kind of. It's kind of a weird thing, because he first appears in an issue of, I think, Web of Spider-Man. Okay. And all you see is him from the back. So it's like, okay, well, what the hell does this guy look like? He can look like anything. Mm-hmm. And so I turned him around and drew his costume from the front and established a lot of whatever those details are. Mm-hmm. But I don't think I get credit for it. So whatever. I don't care.
Well, that's one thing I want to ask, because, it's a lot of stuff in the speculation market. But for you as an artist and you as a creator, what do you consider a first appearance? Is it, like you said, the back of someone in one panel? Or do you think it's, hey, this is the whole guy being incorporated in the story?
Yeah, who cares? I mean, Wolverine appears in one panel in an issue of the Hulk, and it's like, I guess that's technically his first appearance. Right. He doesn't do anything. He just kind of sits there, but we're just, hey, I'm coming at you, Spider, or whatever, Hulk. Yeah. Whatever. I mean, that's an appearance, whatever. Right. I mean, it's not substantive. You're not getting a good feel for what the character's like at all. Right. So if that's important to you, then his first appearance is the next issue. Right. So
makes sense.
But whatever. It's up to the collectors to decide what's important to them. It's not up to us as creators.
Makes sense.
So
I've had characters too who would be like, they appear in one panel and then they don't appear for a few more issues, and then they appear in another panel. It's like, okay, is this, how much of an appearance is this even? Right. I've had this group called North Force who's showed up in Savage Dragon now a couple times. And each time they've shown up, it's been in a double page spread. It's like, here we are. And it's like a couple issues later, here we are again. And it's like, okay, is that an appearance? Kind of. I mean, it's 2 pages of worth of stuff, but it's not a substantive appearance. You don't know them at all.
Right.
You know, the issue I'm working on now, you kind of get to know them more, and you get to see, oh, there's their secret identities and whatever. But by the time I'm on that issue, it's like, that's 4 or 5 issues later, you know.
Makes sense.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Savage Dragon. It's a pretty cool damn comic, and where you could go somewhere with that one. I really think so. No, where did you pull your inspiration from for that character, and did it really evolve from early concepts to what was eventually, published?
Oh yeah, because when I started off, he was a ripoff of Batman.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, because I mean, instead of the 2 ears, he just had the one fin in the middle, and he had a mask, so he had a little face hole, so you could see his Caucasian face through there. And then he had a green mask, and he had a utility belt, and he drove around in the Mark V Speed Racer's car. Oh yeah, he was just a rad dude. And then I kept reinventing him, like, oh, I don't like his secret identity. Because at first it was like just the dumbest possible thing. I had like 3 different characters that I had created as a little kid. I had one who was like, he's my speed racer, so he's like a race car driver, Flash Mercury, here we go. And then I had my dragon character was living on the red planet. He would live up on this tall hill, and when there was bad stuff going on, he'd come jumping down and solve whatever crime. And then I had this other dude who was like basically Captain Kirk. So at one point, I had all 3 of those guys merge into one dude. It's like, hey, I'm one guy now. And it was just like the dumbest crap. And then a little while later, I go, oh, that's stupid. I'm going to do some other guy. And so I have some other guy who turns into Dragon. And it just was super haphazard and whatever I wanted to do. And at that point, there was like no comics I read from issue 1 on. It was all, they would just be all along the way. So like my first Dragon comic I drew as a kid it's Dragon number 63. It's like, because I had no conception of, oh no, you start with 1, keep going from there. It was like, oh, I thought that was the way to go. And so I was, for the first bunch of comics I did as a little kid, they would just be random issues of stuff. Here's Powerhouse in his own book, number 54 or whatever.
That's how you build up the mystique. People are like, well, what happened to the first 4 issues? I don't know. Gotta find out.
So and eventually it was like William Johnson would transform, and then he would put on a mask and run around and be the Dragon. And then I got tired of drawing the mask all the time and all the other stuff. And I also didn't like that I always had to deal with his secret identity and what his secret identity was up to, because it's like, oh, this guy sucks. I just want to do the Dragon all the time. He sucks. So at that point, I was like, I'm just going to rip these 2 guys apart and make it 2 separate guys. And I still had William was still able to turn into the Dragon for no reason, but he would wear a costume and have his mind. And then Dragon became his own dude, and then he went off and had his own crazy adventures. And I just drew my own comics I probably drew 70 comics when I was a little kid. Some of them were 100 pagers, and I was just like, oh, I'm drawing comics. This is awesome. So I just stacks and stacks of these terrible comics on 8.5 by 11, folded in half and stapled up the side. And then when I was 19, that's when I had drawn a Dragon story that ended up in graphic fantasy. So when I self-published that was like that was the culmination of everything I had done with the dragon up to that point. Was like, all right, here's my big payoff, finally, the big time. And we printed that thing.
Right.
And then, and then afterward, it was like, all right, I want to use him in Megaton. I'll reinvent him somewhat more since then. Because one of the things I had done is I killed off Dragon's wife or girlfriend or whatever she was in my unpublished comics. So when I was dealing with him in graphic fantasy, he had this dead wife. It was like, oh, my dead wife is so terrible. And then, so when I did Megaton, it was like, oh, I shouldn't have killed her off. I'll have her be hanging around and have a wife again. So each time I would kind of reinvent it and start all over again. And then same thing happened, 10 years later at Image Comics, where it's like, all right, well, I'm going to start at the start and find my way.
Well, when you jumped to Image, did you know right away, okay, I'm doing Savage Dragon, like I'm bringing him back, or did you have other things that you wanted first?
Me and Fabian Nicieza had done a pitch for X Factor, and so I had created a character for that, and so I was kind of like, oh, I want to use this visual that I came up with for that pitch. And so I was like, I'll do the Super Patriot guy. And then when it came time to do it, was like, I really want to just do the dragon. I'm not gonna want to do Super Patriot. He sucks.
You made the right choice.
I mean, as much as I wanted to establish this guy before anybody else did anything similar, I was like, screw it. Originally, I was going to introduce him, Super Patriot, in Spider-Man. And the editor objected to it because he had that flag on his mask. And he was like, oh, we're gonna get hate mail because he's wearing this flag and he's a villain and blah blah blah. So you got to change that. We can't have a flag on his face. And so it's like, all right, whatever. And so then that's when the character Cyborg X was originally going to be Super Patriot. And Fabian, he was going to be an updated version of the Crimson Commando, who was like an X-Men villain. And Fabian had set it up like in all these X-Men annuals that Crimson Commando was getting screwed up so that he could become this cyborg dude. And then he wasn't able to pay that off, and we didn't get to pay it off because we didn't get the book.
Right.
So I was like, well, I'll put him in Spider-Man. At least he'll get to do that. And it was like, all right, you didn't get to do that either. So it's like, screw it. I'll use him in Savage Dragon over at Image. So I had him show up in the second issue of that.
Right. I wanted to ask real quick, just to jump back a little, because I know the Image story's been told a million times, how it came together. But I want to know your perspective as a young man. You're popular with Spider-Man, you make Image, and then suddenly like the eyes of the comic world are on you guys to see, what's going to happen. How are you handling all that? How are you handling it as an artist, as a person, and saying like, okay, we're like the Beatles now. Everyone's watching. Everyone wants to know what we're going to do next. And where do we go from here? Hey guys, I hate to brag, but I have a pretty nice comic collection, right?
Yeah.
Well, the way I keep it so nice is getting my bags, boards, and boxes from BCW because I love my books and I want to keep them safe.
The last thing anybody wants is a sloppy comic book collection. You don't want your issues just sitting around, unbagged, unboarded, unboxed, lonely, depressed. Give them some love. Put them in a bag. Get a board. Put them in a box. And you know what? If you're not a comic collector, and I'm not sure why you're not, but if you're not, BCW still has you covered. They got all kinds of sports memorabilia displays. They have Pokemon displays. They have displays for things you probably even haven't thought are collectibles. So definitely check them out.
baseballs, footballs, records, CDs, what have you, all your memorabilia for collecting. BCW Supplies has everything you need. And if you head over there, use promo code DBB, get a 10% discount. We'll appreciate it, and you will too.
I don't know. I'm just trying to do my book. I just wanted to. My goal was always to do comics. That was my goal. That was the dream. Was if I could do this comic book for the rest of my life, I'm going to be super happy. So I got to do that, and that was it. That was the goal. That was the dream. So I'm going to sit there and I'm going to draw comics as much as I can. And there just suddenly was all this other crap that people were like, oh, we want to do toys and we want to do video games. We want to do all this stuff. But for the most part, unless somebody sounded like they really had their act together, I just ignored it and was doing my book. And then, but at some point, a Savage Dragon cartoon was pitched, and that did become a reality for a little while.
Was that an interesting experience having that put to screen? Did you have a lot of input?
It was all right. It's kind of neat to go, oh, look, there's my guy, and he can turn his head, and the fin kind of works, and whatever. And it was fine. It wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. The voices weren't what I wanted them to be, and characters didn't do what it wasn't like an edgy cartoon by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that was. Glad you mentioned the edge factor, because that's one of the things that sticks out about Savage Dragon is like it's in the comics world up until that point it's pretty damn edgy.
Yeah,
I mean, it was pretty brutal, pretty violent, and that cover is awesome.
Yeah, I think both covers blow my mind.
Yeah, no. I mean, Savage Dragon, like, I think it gets into an argument with God.
We have God show up. We have the
I love that. I mean,
whatever the hell we want to.
I remember when that was it was mentioned in the news at the time, and I was like, "What? What are you talking?" I was like, "Wow, yeah, he's God," because no one seems to really, like when it comes to religious characters, DC and Marvel. And I maybe I'm wrong on this, but they won't mention the character by name. They'll have some analog of them. So like, Marvel has, instead of like the devil, they have Mephisto, or DC has Neron or someone like that.
Yeah. Whatever, guys. Come on.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, what is there, like some unwritten rule?
The devil. Let's go. Boom.
Yeah. I mean, South Park had, Santa versus Jesus. They didn't pull any punches. I mean, like, was there some type of unwritten rule in the comics world? Like, well, let's not do this.
Well, there was the comics code. And so Marvel and DC were both at that early stage submitting their work to the comics code. Okay. So there were definitely like rules that had to be followed and things you were not supposed to do. So they were treading very carefully.
But you guys said screw it.
But whatever. Nobody was overlooking my stuff at all to any degree. And to this day, it's like I don't have an editor who's saying no. Right. That doesn't exist. I'm in charge. I decide what's in this book. And so and occasionally that'll get me, wouldn't say in trouble, but there is occasional times where I'll go, oh, that was a step farther than I probably should have gone. Oh, well, I won't do that next issue.
Well, how does that feel though? I mean, having complete control of your book, like you steer the ship, like what is that?
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. In fact, when you go back and try to do stuff at Marvel or DC, it's like, oh, this sucks. I forgot about this part. It's like DC had asked me at one point to do a Superman cover. And they were like, it's got to have Superman and Batman on it. Right. And I just sent it in. And they're like, oh, no, you're supposed to send us a sketch first. It's a good thing we like this. And it's like, well, yeah, it's a good thing you like it because it's the only one you're getting. I'm not drawing another one.
I was about to say, like, could you ever see yourself going back or doing a small runs with a DC or Marvel, or have you at the point now where you're like, I'm happy doing exactly what I'm doing, and
I mean, I am happy doing what I'm doing. There's always talk about doing something over there, and occasionally it does come up, and occasionally an editor will be like, "Oh, we got to have you work on this or work on that. This will be cool." And if I'm in the right mood and feel like doing it, then it's like, all right, whatever, what the hell? I'm up for it. I always like drawing that guy or whatever. But there's also, I mean, the most fun I have doing comics is working on Savage Dragon. So it's like, why would you go and do something else? And the only reason I kind of like to on occasion is just to get a break. To get your mind thinking about other stuff. And when you're suddenly going, hey, do you want to write a write and draw a Spider-Man story? It's like, yeah, let me think about what I would do with a Spider-Man story. Let me see what that would be all about. And you can kind of come up with, all right, I could do this and this and this, and that would be kind of fun to do. Right. And it does come up. I mean, last year I did a Captain America story. That was Captain America: The End. And I did a 10-page Spider-Man story that was for one of those books where they were like, hey, let's get the band back together or whatever.
How has your writing evolved, do you think, as you've gotten older?
I think it's less clumsy than it was. I don't know.
It's more. Is it more fun now? I mean, do you prefer writing or drawing?
They're both kind of the same thing, because I kind of write and draw as I make comics. So it's weird to write and have somebody else draw it, because then it never looks the way you think it's gonna. So it's like, all right, what do I do with this? Right. But I also don't write. I don't write full script. I do write plot style, because I prefer working plot style. So, when I'm drawing stuff from somebody else and it's a full script, it's like, oh boy, here we go. It's just like, why do you need me? Why am I part of this process? Right. That's kind of how I feel on when I'm working that way. It's like, this will be easier for both of us if you just give me a plot. So. I'll get it done way faster. And it'll be way better. So let's just do it that way. But I did like an issue of Supreme from an Alan Moore script. Okay. And it was like, holy crap, man, this is unbearable. It's like he's describing every single thing in great detail and then reiterating the same thing over and over again. Like he'll tell you that character's holding a bag, and it's like in the next panel, remember that guy's still holding the bag. In the next panel, Andy's still holding the bag. It's like, shut up already. I get it. He's holding the bag. Just tell me when he drops the bag. Like this is too much, Oh, he's wearing this kind of shirt from this Sears catalog published this year. It's like,
wow.
Is that important?
Is it really that detailed?
It's crazy. It's crazy detail.
Wow.
Yeah. It would be like, I don't know, like a 30-page plot or 30-page script or something for maybe longer than that. I mean, it's way longer than a comic book.
Right.
And it's way more to read. It's just like, holy crap.
Now, are you at the point, I mean, were you able to go back to the writer and say, like, listen, like I've gone over this, I don't know if this is going to work, or do you have to sort of just follow what they're giving you?
Depends on what I'm doing. If I'm on Supreme, I didn't check with Alan.
Okay.
I was just drawing the damn thing. Because it was the nice thing about working from a full script is that it's done, and so they don't need to do anything more. It's already done. Their part of it is over. They can go and in some cases, I think Alan even had a falling out with Rob or whatever. So it's like, oh, I don't want to work with you anymore. It's like, well, we got all these stories you wrote, so we just get somebody to draw them, and they've been paid for. So, done.
Now, where Images right now, you guys are really hot right now. You have a lot of books that are very, very popular, a lot of young writers and artists coming in. The vision you had with Image to start, is it the vision that is happening now? Is it has it grown?
Well, I mean, no,
No.
no. I mean, the idea was that it would be, you can do whatever the hell you want to do. So I guess to that, in that respect, yes,
Right.
it is, because it's people doing whatever the hell they want to do,
Mhm.
which is fine. But in terms of what I wanted out of it, I wanted it to be more, hey, let's do this shared universe. Let's all be in here together and have characters going back and forth and all over the place. And there hasn't been very much of that in the last few years.
Mhm.
So I miss that quite a bit. I miss the camaraderie and people just building something that all works together.
Do you think that's something that could happen down the road, or you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, and I think it will. There's, all it takes is for somebody to go, "Oh, that sounds awesome. I want to do that." That's, it's like, okay. And if somebody is at Image and they want to use Savage Dragon in their books, the answer is always yes. It's like, yep, if you're an Image book, you want to use Dragon, go do it.
That's really cool. Now, go ahead, Joe.
No. This is just more of a fan question. I mean, so what you're saying is we could see Spawn and Savage Dragon.
Well, that's happened.
Has it?
Yeah. It's happened. Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. In fact, I was writing and drawing Spawn for almost a year. I did 10 issues in a row, or 9 issues, something like that. I ended up doing 10 issues of Spawn at one point. Todd was inking and rewriting every single goddamn thing I wrote. So,
Well, nice
what
to
is
hear.
that like, taking over someone else's project like that? Is it strange because he sort of, it's his world, and now you have to sort of jump in and manipulate it?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of get back to, oh yeah, this is everything I hate. This is why I left Marvel. This is no good. So yeah, and he was super heavy-handed in terms of the inks, and in terms of the writing stuff. He would change things around, and it's like, dude, this is my characters talking. Can't my characters have my dialogue coming out of their mouths? At least give me that, for crying out loud. So it was like, at that point, it was like, all right, done. I'm out of here. So that was it.
What do you look for now at Image if someone's pitching a story, or if
I'm not the publisher, so I don't have to deal with any of that.
Oh, all right. Are there certain books in the line that you are more interested in, or the ones that you really started to enjoy?
Generally, if it's coming through Robert Kirkman, generally there's something there that's like, all right, I'm into this. And it just depends on the book too. It's like, I like some artists better than others. Usually it starts with the art for me, because I've always been one of those guys, if I don't like the art, I don't like the comic. And it's always been a real tough time for me to go, boy, this thing looks terrible, but I'm going to read it even though it looks terrible. It's like, I've got 1 million comics. I can read 1 million comics. Why would I read something that looks awful? It's sort of like going to a movie where you go, wow, it's a great script, but all the acting is terrible and all the characters look awful and everybody's been miscast. It's like, that's a bad movie. If it's not a well-drawn comic, it's not a good comic. So I kind of go from that. I'll just go, all right, this comic looks good, and it's like, oh, Brandon Graham's doing a new comic. I am there. I am sold.
Right.
You gotta say, that's pretty refreshing to hear someone like you say that. Seriously, I mean, there's so many comics that I've been just, absolutely in love with over the years, and then you get to a run of a particular, artist or writer, and all of a sudden it's not not necessarily, it doesn't have to be what I'm used to, but if it just looks bad,
Oh, I
you know,
fail
I'm
in
like,
so many books.
like I just don't like
But
it.
there's
Yeah.
also I've got other things too where I'm like, I don't like it because of this stupid reason, and often my reasons are really dumb. And I'll just be like, I hate this colorist. He is wrecking this. There's like, well, Walt Simonson, I love his work. And it's like, I'm gonna buy him through thick and thin. And then it'll be like one job will come out and it's like really badly colored. And I'll be like, I'm not buying this one. Awful colors. And it's like, oh, I feel terrible about it because I love him, support his work, but I don't like that. Or I hate mixed case lettering, where there's upper and lower case.
Mhm.
It just aesthetically, it bothers me so much that I'm like, I'm not buying this. So like the new X-Men comes along and they've got mixed case lettering. It's like, oh, you've been reading the new X-Men, it's really good. I'm like, no, it sucks. You seen that lettering? It's terrible.
That's a deal breaker.
So it's messed up.
Well, who are some artists that have caught your eyes through the years that, either, as a kid or stuff like that, that you were like, okay, these books I got to get just because of what I'm seeing here?
I don't know. I almost have to look around the room and go like, oh, I'm getting Philadelphia because I like the way that looked. I mean, it's usually I'll follow John Romita Jr. on anything he happens to be on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
If Rick Leonardi's jumping all over the world, I'll follow him wherever he goes.
Right.
Chris Bichello, however you pronounce it, I like his stuff. God, I'm blank. I always blank on everybody. God damn it. There's a bunch of guys where I like, if I like their art, I'll just follow them wherever they go and get whatever it is. And then I'm sent all the Image books because I'm one of the Image partners.
Right.
So I just get a box and I just get everything. So those things, I was like, I've got tons of books. So there's always that. And then I've got a bazillion back issues of everything all over the house. So if there's anything that's like, I'd just rather read an issue of Commandy, the last Pointer, it's like, all right, there you go. You've got those in abundance.
Hey, you got the coolest job in the world, so.
Yeah. But most of the time I'm creating rather than consuming. So there's a lot more of that. I don't read a huge amount of comics. I look at a lot of comics. I don't read a huge amount.
That was actually gonna be my next question, but you answered it for me.
Yeah, there's not a huge amount of stuff. The problem is, like, since COVID came around, I actually haven't gone to a store in a year. So it's like I've just been like cold turkey. All right, I'm not getting anything until I'm able to get my vaccine and be totally up to date on everything. And I was just vaccinated today, so
Awesome.
Congrats.
So,
That's awesome.
it's going to be a month before it's completely fine and everything's awesome.
Right.
But at that point, it's like, all right, you can venture out and at least do something.
Yeah.
So I've just been getting whatever Image is putting out. So I got tons of Image stuff.
And do you, this may be a stupid question, but do you read everything that Image does?
No, not at all. Not at all. A lot of it's like, I don't like that. I'm not into it. Whatever.
Right.
It's like some stuff you get into and some stuff you don't. And it is what it is.
Right.
Yep. No, I understand.
So
any books or titles that you wish you had a longer run on, or that you wish you have given the opportunity to at least try something with?
Oh, sure, all of them. every damn book. I mean, I would have loved to have done a run on all the big books. You think about it, it's like, I would love to do a run on Wonder Woman or Captain Marvel or the Incredible Hulk or Fantastic Four or any of those things. It's like, they're all awesome. I love all those comics. I'd do Superman in a heartbeat. That'd be great.
That'd be awesome.
And every one of those books, I'll tell you the first thing I do. they'd be all new villains. I wouldn't use any other villains.
Ah,
that they'd be all new.
So I'm glad you mentioned that. I wanted to ask you, like, what? So this is going to be a loaded question, but like, what do you think about the state of comics nowadays? Because, and the reason why I asked that, it doesn't seem like comic book, the big two, I'm going to say, they're not really making anything new. They are repackaging what has already been made over the past some odd years. And yes, I mean, some of it's cool and it's neat, it's different, but nothing seems to be new.
No, they're just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Right.
That's basically what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's like, oh boy, look at this. Isn't this cool? I'm like, no, it's not. It's not. I mean, it's like, oh, it's cool that you've got different writers and different artists working on different books. It's always neat to go, oh, look, there's this artist you haven't seen draw this character yet. Won't this be cool to see this writer or this artist on that? And it's like, yes, often it is.
Yeah.
But beyond that, it's like, how come you got a new guy coming on Superman and doing a run on that book and he created jack shit? It's like, well, how come I don't have 40 new villains from that new writer's run on that book?
I was thinking the same thing actually about Superman too, because I mean, I was when
and on
I heard
all those books, it's like if you're a writer and you're just a writer on a book, and you've got artists that are working on this stuff, all you need to do is describe a dude, and then you've got a new character. And DC and Marvel both have some equity and stuff. And it's super easy to come up with a new character. I don't even get it. It's like, oh, there's this guy called Sandman and he's made up of sand. It's like, okay, well, come up with 100 different things that people could be made of, where you can go, oh, this guy's made up of bees. Okay, fucking bees, those are no good. This guy's made up of slugs. This guy's made up of dirt. This guy's made up of dog shit. This guy's made up of canned corn. This guy's made up of scrap metal. This guy's made up of glass. This guy's made up of broken diamonds. This guy's, and you go suddenly it's like, oh, you just created like 40 different dudes just using the basic theme of Sandman.
Right.
And then it's like all this other stuff. It's like, all you got to do is describe something, and you could be describing something that the other company has. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, well, who's DC's Magneto? Let's come up with our own guy. Who's Marvel's whatever. And it's just describe something. It doesn't even matter. And then your artist what's he going to do? He's got to draw it. That's his gig, So he's got to come up with some visual for something. And then suddenly you've got this new character that's running around. Well, that's cool. That's what you need. You need some new characters. Because what you've got it's just stagnation, and that's no fun for anybody.
Yeah, well, it seems like they're not for lack of a better term, they're not in the business of making comics anymore. It just seems like they're status quo, keeping the lights on, in the sense that, we're going to basically keep renewing our IP. And it's kind of, from a fan standpoint, it's frustrating.
I think there ends up being this thing too, where writers are sitting there going, well, if I'm going to create something new, I'm going to create it over at a company where I can control it and own it completely, which is like, that is awesome. But if you only have the one idea, that's sad, dude. You got to come up with way more shit than that. Look, you can look at Jack Kirby's career and go, hey, this guy created like 1,000 characters. And you come up with 3? That sucks. That's all you got?
Well, I wanted to ask you real quick about when you're working at a place like Marvel DC, when you create a new character, do you have to pitch it to an editor and kind of get approval to do it? Is there a whole...
Depends on what you're doing it for. If I'm on Spider-Man and I'm going, I want to do a run on Spider-Man. I want to equal Steve Ditko's run on Spider-Man. I want to do 38 issues, and it's going to be 38 new villains. There's going to be a new one every issue. Bam, bam, bam. Let's go.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, okay. If you want to do that, sounds good.
Okay.
You've already got Spider-Man. So that's the sell is Spider-Man as a book.
Right.
And as long as they love you doing Spider-Man, you're good to go.
Mhm.
But if you're sitting there going, I want to do my own guy, Captain Asbestos,
Right.
can we do that? Then it's like, okay, if this is a lead character in a lead book and you're creating something completely new, we need to approve that, because that's a terrible name and that's a terrible character, and they could be batting ideas back and forth. You might have to submit a bunch of different designs for costumes and stuff like that. But if it's just like some bonehead villain that Spider-Man's fighting in an issue,
Right.
I mean, if you do something that's terrible, they can be like, all right, dude, you can't have his dick hanging out. That's not cool, But as long as it's reasonably decent looking, for the most part, they don't care.
What was the first big one that you pitched?
I pitch things all the time that I didn't get.
Okay. How frustrating is that though? Because
Oh yeah, it's super frustrating. It's
Yeah.
like I wanted to work on the Hulk. That was a big book for me, and I had all these ideas of, oh, I want to do this with the character and that with the character, and then you come up with ideas that are specific to that guy, and those ideas aren't necessarily applicable to something else. It's like, this is a particular, because this guy has these very specific attributes. You can't just take those things and go, I'm going to use that for Superman. So when Superman turns back into Bruce Banner, it's like, no, it doesn't fucking work. And you can't just take that and use it over here. It doesn't work anymore. You need these components in order for this story to even work.
Mhm.
So you end up coming up with a lot of stuff that is like, I don't know that I'll ever be able to tell this story.
Right.
It's like I've got Batman stories that I don't know that I will ever tell,
Mhm.
or Captain Marvel stories, or whoever. It's like, who knows? This will ever come out.
But it's
And
great.
it doesn't matter, because I got more stuff than I could possibly draw anyway. So
Right.
just get done what you can get done.
So that was our interview with Erik Larsen. I absolutely loved it. Like Oren said, when he called me up and told me that we got Erik Larsen, I freaked out. I was driving, dropped a 4-letter word with my kids in the car, thought maybe he was joking, but it was for real. I was in awe that we had a chance to speak to him, and he was so, so cool. And I had a chance to actually talk to him about the time that Savage Dragon got into a fight with God in one of the comics. I mean, how crazy is that?
And a little behind the scenes, after we stopped recording, my daughter was here and wanted to say hello, and he actually took the time, talked to her. She showed him one of the pictures she drew. He was really cool, very nice about it, very supportive, and she was psyched. So thank you, Mr. Larsen. If you were listening to this, that meant a lot to her.
I never got a chance to tell the story. Unfortunately, it wasn't part of the interview, but I had submitted some character designs to the Savage Dragon as part of, I think it was like an issue number 10 contest where, you can submit characters and the winner would be featured in Savage Dragon. I forget what the name of the character that won was, some lobster kind of guy.
Remember the one that you created? Fang.
Yes.
I actually sent in 3 characters, only 2 of which I can remember. Fang,
I remember Fang.
which was basically a Scorpion ripoff, but I was trying desperately to be like, no, it's not. It's really just much cooler. And Stealth was the other one, which is basically a dude who can just kind of like blend into the background. I feel like there has to be a character like that out there, but he wasn't very visually appealing because you basically can't see him. It's just like there's a tree, there's stealth. Anyway, fascinating interview, great subject. And speaking of which, an absolute legend coming up next week, Walter Simonson.
Mm-hmm.
That Walter Simonson.
Mhm.
Thor.
X Factor.
And then X Factor and a bunch of other stuff.
I think
Just an
Thor.
amazing talent. And we're so psyched to hear his voice and his perspectives on all of the favorite characters and storylines he created over the years. But before then, please rate, review, and subscribe. Keep us going. We need your positive mojo. We need your energy. So please tell your friends about this podcast. We would love to keep bringing it to you, and we have so much more in store. So without further ado, thank you all, and good night.
Later.
So, yeah.